there's a healthy extent of perfectionism, and then there's a toxic perfectionism. So the toxic perfectionism is what we're talking about here, where you want to do everything completely perfectly and leave no scope for errors, no scope for mistakes, no scope for failure. So what happens in that extreme end of toxic perfectionism is becomes black and white, all or none, right? So, and I know this because I'm recovering. I have recovered. I think I've recovered now. Been recovering for a long while. But in my younger days, I was a very toxic perfectionist, which means I'll only take part in a competition if I know I will win. Otherwise, I even won't, because failure is not an option, right? And by chance, if I do fail or if I don't do well, instead of looking at what I could have done better, instead of looking at the learning, instead of looking at what are the growth opportunities, I would go into defense mode and blaming mode. It was not fair. The umpire was partial. This didn't work. Those people cheated. It wasn't my fault. Oh, I was not well that day. So I'm making excuses, right? Either I'm going into the blame game outside or I'm making an excuse inside. None of which is functional, right? Because none of which is actually allowing me to grow from that experience of the failure or the letdown. And as you can see, it's also, I'm actually saying no to a lot of opportunities and projects just because the success isn't guaranteed. And then the other thing about perfectionists is that we land up being very harsh, self-critical about ourselves as well as others. And we talked about stress, because the fear of failure is so high. The level of stress becomes very, very high. And that also, makes us do things that we wouldn't otherwise do, in terms of being very unhealthily competitive or not actually taking the long-term picture and being, sort of going all out to win at any cost, even if there's a bigger price that we pay in either the long run or in terms of just collective other people spoiling relationships, right? So, and all of this toxic perfectionism, the antidote. So if you go to someone like me who was a toxic perfectionist and say, stop being a perfectionist, they're not going to change. Nothing's going to change, right? You can't go and say, stop being. But just leave that perfectionism a bit aside and you start working on overcoming the fear of failure, at re-looking at failure, reframing failure. Remember the letter to the 12-year-old that I asked you to write about what can failure be? And giving ourselves the permission to fail, the permission to make mistakes, understanding that mistakes happen to everyone, failures will happen to everyone, losses will happen to everyone. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but something that we can actually learn from and grow from so that we don't repeat it if it was a repeatable thing. And of course, there are some categories where it might not have been your fault at all, in which case, again, you don't go down into depression or into blaming and shaming and all of that. Instead, you're looking at, okay, how can I make the best of what has happened and how has it made me stronger? So you start working on this part, right? The fear of failure, the resilience, all of that. Slowly, 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 over time, you see that the toxic perfectionism by itself has gone down, right? Because now you're being more gentle on yourself. You're being more open to, oh, yes, I'm doing this project and I know that I could fail or I could succeed. It could go my way or it may not go my way. And I'm going to make the best of it, whatever happens. So you're not avoiding, you're not walking through life, walking through your career with this algorithm of I need to avoid failure at any cost. That is what a perfectionist does. And that doesn't open up many options for us. That, in fact, that makes us our lives and careers very, 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 very narrow. And we put ourselves in a small box, only doing everything that we've done before, tried and tested, where we're sure we'll succeed, where we already have demonstrable results. And that becomes our little playground instead of the big playground that life and our career can be. Okay. So this